Fellow Falcoholics, what is up? Welcome back to the Falcoholic Live, presented by FanDuel. He has returned. Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way, back with us now. I'm, of course, Kevin Knight of Falcoholic Kevin, so we've got the band back together here on Falcoholic Live for you guys. We're going to recap Falcons free agency since we haven't heard from Adnan since before all the major signings happened. So we'll get Adnan's take on free agency, sort of go over our grades of the Falcons sort of free agency as a whole, our thoughts on sort of the direction of the team under the new leadership and some of the changes and what we think about all that stuff. So exciting show ahead of us tonight here on Falcoholic Live. Thanks to everyone for joining us. And a reminder, if you haven't liked and subscribed already, this would be a great time to do that because we're trying to get to 10K here really soon, and we're closing in on that number. So if you could help us out there, real big appreciation. But before we get any further, Adnan, it's been a little while since the people have heard from you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, it's been a hiatus. I think I was out for like 6 weeks or so, but yeah, definitely very happy to be back. Very happy to be talking about some Falcons football. We have had a lot of moves happen, a lot of moves in free agency. We got the draft to look forward to. We're rolling right now in full gear. So definitely excited to sort of chop it all up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Falcons have been they have obliged with some nice moves spread out throughout the last couple of weeks. We got plenty to talk about. Obviously, we could talk about the abundance of B. Robinsons on the offense at this point. It's gonna be hell for those fantasy football trades. You guys are
Yeah, I
gonna
was
have
just about to say
head on a
that.
swivel out there, guys, if you're trading for B. Robinson. But a lot of stuff to get to tonight. Excited to talk about it. But on, there's been a ton of moves. A ton of stuff has happened. Not necessarily major moves, but just as sort of like a bird's eye view first before we dive into any individual signings you want to talk about. Did this sort of style of free agency where the Falcons more or less, more mid to 1 year deals, smaller signings, was this sort of what you were expecting, or is this a surprise to you?
Yeah, no, I was absolutely expecting it, and unlike a lot of people in the fan base, I was actually hoping for it. I mean, remember we spoke about it. I think back in November, we had a very star-studded show with me, you. Well, we're not the stars, but the stars there were
Mostly us, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But it was. I don't know if you guys recall who watched that show and who participated in that show, but we had sort of a breakdown of what we think it's going to take for the Falcons to get to that sort of contending level. And this is back before we knew that they were going to clean house with Fontenot and Morris and all of those guys. But remember, I think what my sort of take on it was step one was you had to clean house. And they did. I'm very happy that Arthur Blank did that. And, we all know, my opinions and our opinions regarding that. And this other thing was this, even after they clean house, this is not or was not going to be sort of a quick rebuild. It's not going to be, okay, well, Morris is gone, Fontenot's gone. This team is now going to ascend a level up into, the division winners and up into contention. It was, this cap sheet is kind of messed up. The Falcons draft sort of status is kind of messed up. They only have 5 picks this year. And I mean, you heard it from Ian Cunningham. He said one of the first things he said in his press conference was, yeah, we're not going to, only have 5 draft picks moving forward. That's going to be a this year only thing if we don't scrounge up some more draft picks. But it was always going to be, I always wanted this to be sort of that eat your vegetables type season where you sort of have to fix the mess that the previous regime left you. And that's sort of what we went through in 2021 after the 2020 season where Dan Quinn got fired, Thomas Dimitrov got let go. I'm so sick of this team in general taking shortcuts as they have been the past few years and squandering those opportunities. I just want like a nice clean build from a nice brick by brick build that can sort of like last. And I sort of feel like that may be what we're going towards, and that may be what Ian Cunningham has set his philosophy toward doing. And I was very pleased that the Falcons are going about it like this. It's not sexy. It's not exciting. The team's probably not going to, have a winning record this year. I don't think at this point, especially after the James Pierce stuff happened, where you know you don't know what his status is going to be for this season. But you know they're sort of focusing on those comp picks. They're focusing on having future flexibility right now for 2027. That feels like it may be a sexy offseason because you may have an abundance of draft picks. I think you're up 3 comp picks from in addition to you know all of your picks that you still haven't traded that you still have for next year. And I think the Falcons are projected to have what $140 million in cap space next year. Obviously, it's not going to be that much. You have to re-sign Bijan, you have to re-sign Drake London, but I'm actually very pleased that there's not sort of that that idea that those delusions of grandeur with Ian Cunningham and Kevin Stefanski, the way that there has been with Terry Fontenot of, oh, well, we're never rebuilding. We're just going to contend this year. We're going to contend this year. This team is obviously never going to contend this year. Make it a nice reset year, a nice retool year, and make this one of those years where you sort of catapult. Like this is the year where you're set, where you're building the catapult. You can't just you know jump on it. You have to build it first. This is the year where you're putting the pieces together, building on it, and then hopefully next year you sort of get on that catapult and go toward the sky.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's sort of a necessary, like 1 year sort of reset where, you know, I don't think they are going to be terrible. And I think the signings that they are making, a lot of these 1 year deals are sort of like high. They are moves that have upside. And like if enough of them hit, you could see this team contending for the NFC South because again, the division's not very good. So if you get the better coaching, you hit on some of these 1 year deals, you get some bounce back seasons from guys. You get, you know, Samson Ebukam, if he's healthy finally, he was a guy who had 9.5 sacks before he tore his Achilles, you know, so like if you hit on a few of these 1 year deals, like you could be looking better than you think. And maybe you're, you know, competing with 9 wins or something like that for this NFC South. But if things don't go well, then it doesn't matter. Like, it's like, okay, great. Like we learned, you know, we're going to learn a lot about all these 1 year deal players. We're going to learn a lot about these guys that we're giving extensions to. I expect the Falcons are going to re-sign, probably going to extend Bijan this year to go ahead and get out in front of that. It sounds like, I know Adam Schefter was talking today or yesterday about how he expects Bijan to be an extension candidate and expects the Falcons to give him an extension this offseason, which makes sense. You know, if you think he's that type of guy that's going to be a market-setting running back, you know, go ahead and get out in front of that before guys like, you know, Gibbs and some of these other top running backs go out there and push the market even higher. But, you know, Drake London and Bijan Robinson, and if they want to commit to Kyle Pitts, they could knock out all those 3 deals this year, start paying towards those now, and then have more flexibility on those deals long-term, while leaving yourself tons of room next year to kind of do what you want to with this roster, whether that's re-signing some of these guys that maybe impress you. Maybe it's letting some of these guys walk for comp picks because you're going to have just a glut of free agents next year. I mean, like you look at the Falcons free agency list this year versus next year versus last year. It's like, wow, they've just got a million 1 year deals out here. So any of these guys that hit, you know, could potentially be and play for comp picks, and we'll see obviously how that plays out. But, you know, what do you think about that approach of starting to get that ball rolling on the comp picks? Obviously, none of the picks they got this year are incredibly like impactful, but they are looking at getting 3 of them, and that's, you know, a significant number no matter how you slice it.
Well, it's so refreshing. Like I've actually been sort of not losing my mind a little bit at the lack of comp picks, but it's just felt like the teams had some wasted opportunities. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't blame them for not having comp picks during those years when they were making free agent moves, because that's sort of, you know, any move that you make in free agency sort of cancels out any comp pick you may have gotten. But I just think back to, I think it was 2021, where the year, you know, which parallels to this offseason for the Falcons when it comes to sort of clearing the cap space, clearing the cap hits, and just resetting, because Terry Fontenot did have to do that in year 1 to sort of untangle the mess that Thomas Dimitrov left him, and now the cycle's been completed. He's retangled things up for Ian Cunningham to now untangle. But remember, I don't think the Falcons had a single comp pick that they got from that 2021 offseason. And it's sort of, they should have, they could have. Because remember, I think Dante Fowler ended up being a free agent that year, and he would have fetched you a 4th-round pick. But instead, remember the Falcons signing Marcus Mariota to that $6 million contract after the Deshaun Watson pursuit failed, and after they ended up trading Matt Ryan, after the entire quarterback fiasco of that offseason, as has been well documented. And the Falcons, remember, what did they do? It almost felt like a panic move. But we have to fill the quarterback position immediately. Bring in Marcus Mariota. And that ended up costing the Falcons a 4th-round comp pick. A 4th-round pick's not nothing. Like, it can be a very valuable depth piece. And we know that Fontenot had his troubles with hitting on those day 2, day 3 picks. And that's why the Falcons had so many depth issues these past couple of years. Falcons' problems weren't, at the top. Obviously, Bijan's a superstar. Drake London, when he wasn't injured, has sort of evolved into one of the, I'd say, top 10 wide receivers in the game. And then you had a lot of defensive talent, defensive stars, and Jesse Bates. Last year, you had James Pierce sort of break out immediately as a rookie. But the Falcons have been plagued by depth issues year in and year out. And one of those reasons, it's 3 reasons, in my opinion, all to do with the draft. One is outright missing on some of those day 2 and day 3 picks. I mean, you couldn't really address the pass. You had to overspend for the pass rush last draft because you missed on Ebiketie. You missed on D'Angelo Malone. Zach Harrison was, I guess, fine at times, but, he wasn't anything to write home about. Or, we definitely hope that Zach Harrison does have another step to take. Second reason is because you made some, in my opinion, foolish trade-ups to just sort of give away those 4th, 5th, 6th-round picks, especially in the 2nd round. Remember the trade-up for Richie Grant? The trade-up for Matthew Bergeron's been fine, but you really had so many options. You could have taken Brian Branch at your original pick in that draft, and then the trade-up for Ruka Rororo, there were a multitude of really talented prospects that were gonna wind up, just by the numbers game at your pick, that you just sort of were impatient from the perspective of Terry Fontenot. And the third reason is comp picks. I mean, this is sort of a valuable play. This is what the Ravens take advantage of year in and year out. This is what, a lot of these very strong NFL front offices and franchises take advantage of. I think the Falcons made, one comp pick in Terry Fontenot's?
I think it was one.
Yeah. 5 years, you made one comp pick. The Falcons are, on pace to triple that in Ian Cunningham's first offseason. I think they're supposed to get, a 5th, a 6th, and a 7th right now.
Yep.
Those are valuable chips. Like, whether you make the pick or not, they can be trade chips. You can trade a 5th rounder for a valuable veteran player who's on a big contract. We've seen it happen year in and year out. You can use those for trade ups. You can use those for special teams players. You can use those for depth guys. You can use those to, pick who would be your favorite undrafted free agent. We know the undrafted free agent market can be very robust for teams in certain years, and you can sort of call first dibs on it. And Terry Fontenot just never took advantage of that. I'm really happy that Ian Cunningham has a profoundly different philosophy of really valuing the draft, because the draft is supposed to be a GM's bread and butter. You can have, you can be a great pro personnel guy, but if you don't really succeed in the draft, you're not going to be long for the league, because the NFL has been created and cultivated with those rookie contracts to where you really become a good team and a great team through the draft if you hit on your draft picks. And the Falcons weren't really doing that too much up until, this last year's draft class was great. I'm glad that we have a GM that really sort of prioritizes the draft now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important. I think that was really Fontenot's weakness was just an ability to be able to consistently nail the draft. And consistently nailing the draft means hitting on like 50% or more of your picks. Like even the best GMs are going to miss like a decent amount of the time. But, I think with Fontenot, he didn't maximize opportunities in the draft and then also missed a lot on day 2. And I think that was sort of like when you trade away a lot of day 3 picks and then you trade up a lot on day 2 and you don't hit, like it's just you don't have as many opportunities, and then you're also not hitting. So, and like some of those things are, Braylon Trice, like we still haven't seen Braylon Trice play. Is that an evaluation mistake or is that just bad luck? But again, that's part of the reason why you need more bites at the apple, because your maybe Braylon Trice, if he never got hurt, would be, this amazing like day 2 hit for Terry Fontenot. But guys do get hurt. Bad things happen. Things go wrong.
NFL.
Yes.
It's the NFL. It's in the nature of the sport that there's going to be injuries. That's why it's so silly to me, this sort of caveat of, if everyone stays healthy, we'll be good. 32 teams can say that. Like if you turn injuries off, I'm sure everyone would be good. But, you can't sort of brace for that. Yeah. That was sort of my big weakness going into last season. It's why I wasn't super, super high on the team last season, just because of the depth. Like the entire, especially on defense, like the starting defense was amazing. And I'm sorry, I know I did cut you off to hijack this point. But remember, like the depth, like you had J.D. Bertrand as your first linebacker off the bench the second Divine Diablo got hurt. Did you just expect that your entire linebacking core was going to play every single snap over the course of 17 weeks? It doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. And I know we had a comment from Ma Sebin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sorry if I got that wrong. But saying like, oh, how can you say like, oh, I like these signings, like Tua, for example, and I'm sure we'll get to Tua here shortly, and then also say this is a reset and rebuild, because they're not mutually exclusive. Like you can say we're resetting this roster. We're not going to be giving out a bunch of long-term contracts. We're going to be bringing in a lot of one-year deals. We're going to be testing out a lot of players that are still here to see how this roster looks. That doesn't mean they're tanking. That doesn't mean they're not trying to win. I said it as well. Like you can do a reset on this roster while still trying to win the NFC South. Like you couldn't really do this in like the AFC West, right? Where it's like, if you can't get, 10, 12, 13 wins and like you're not going to compete for the AFC West. This isn't the AFC West. This is the NFC South. 9 wins, 8 wins, won this division or whatever. 9 wins won this division. You don't need you can compete in this division without being a great team. And I think that's sort of the line that the Falcons are walking, is we want to be competitive for this division. We think we can be, but we can also do that while not really pushing our chips in yet and sort of figuring out what we have to work with for the future. And, we're going to play the comp pick game. We're going to evaluate all these one-year deals. We're going to see if we can hit on any of these guys and then go forward. So we'll see how that works. But reset doesn't mean tanking. That's not the same thing. It's more like we're not pushing our chips in like we could. Like we talked about it before free agency, where it was this team could create 50, 60, 70 million in cap space if they want. They didn't want to. They didn't do it. They've been pretty, I would say, pretty conservative with their cap, and that's left 2027 mostly intact. But there's still opportunities to spend more if they want. Maybe we will see that after the draft. But they have opportunities, and we'll see how serious they are about either keeping things as sort of minimal as possible, or whether they're going to try to spend more money later in the process, like after the draft, after the comp picks are locked in. I mean, things could change too. So yeah, we got a couple super chats here. We got Alex Foster with the $5. Thanks, Alex. Saying, I have faith in Penix. Maybe it's justified. Maybe it's just hopium. Maybe I'm just tired. But I'm pulling for him more than any QB we've had since Matt Ryan. Well, that's a lot of faith, Alex. I mean, I think Penix deserves a shot. I mean, I think people have just kind of left him in the dust. Penix's biggest issue is he just can't get hurt again. Like, if he gets another serious injury, it doesn't matter how good he looks. Like, no one's going to be able to commit to that. So he has to stay healthy. But, I mean, that's why I like the Tua signing, and we'll get to Tua next, I'm sure, because that's probably the most meaningful addition this offseason. But, this is an opportunity now for Penix to have to, go out and beat a capable NFL quarterback in Tua. And if he can beat out Tua in a competition, then I think we can be fairly confident in his trajectory. And if he can't, that also is important information for the future of this football team. So we'll see how that goes. We got Corey with the 5. Thanks, Corey. Say, hell of a job on the Hawks broadcast, Adnan. # I know that guy. So, yeah.
Appreciate it, Corey. Yeah. I did a little interview on Sports South the other night, and with the fan section that I lead. So they brought someone up last minute. I didn't even know about it until like 2 minutes before, and then I just sort of shot from the hip on that, and it helps that I have so much experience speaking in front of people that I didn't stutter around my words on the broadcast. But
yes,
yeah, glad you enjoyed it, Corey. Go Hawks. I think 13 wins in the last 14. They're beating Detroit tonight. God, the Hawks are giving me life right now.
All we needed was for you to take a month off the show, and then the Hawks just started, getting it together. So maybe that was the secret. I don't know. I don't like that secret, but yeah.
They've also been playing an NFC South like schedule, but they've been taking advantage of it, unlike some people.
Hey, you just got to win the games that are in front of you. The Falcons can't do it, but maybe the Hawks can. Yeah.
Refreshing.
Yep. And then we got Corey with the $2 saying, finally, we're bringing in some SEC guys. Finally, Kevin. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they were ever outright against bringing in SEC guys, but maybe there will be more of an emphasis. I mean, I know they had their entire contingent at Georgia, and then they just hired, I think, Georgia's assistant athletic director or whatever to be an advisor for Matt Ryan or something like that. So I think we might be getting some Georgia players. I don't know. that would be my guess. But
they had the entire brain trust out there, talking with Kirby Smart. I guess they were out there at practice. So, hey, man, Georgia is the best state in America when it comes to high school football, or one of the best per capita. I know California, Texas, and Florida are top 3. But Georgia's population is half of those 3, and they're still always within the top when it comes to 5-star recruits, 4-star recruits. Let's get some of these guys from our own backyard, playing for the Falcons.
Yeah. So we'll see how that develops. Real quick before we dive into Tua and the rest of these Falcons signings, I want to get you a word from our friends over at FanDuel. Thanks again to FanDuel for sponsoring tonight's episode. So you guys know it's March Madness. It's in full swing. I think at this point we're getting there's not as many great upsets on the schedule, and I'm a big upset fan. The one I still like, obviously, we got Texas and Purdue, the last double digit seed alive at this point, I believe. So I'm pulling for Texas here. They're 7.5 point underdogs. So if you believe, then go for Texas here. If you don't believe, you can do Purdue 7.5 point favorites. Maybe that's more your style. I think it's, or maybe you straight up. I think it's plus 270 for Texas straight up over Purdue. Purdue is minus 345 money line. So whatever you like there. Looks like it's projected to be fairly high scoring as well. I think the over-under is 147.5. So check out that if you're a March Madness fan over there. And thanks again to FanDuel for sponsoring tonight's episode. But yeah, let's start with Tua, because that's been, I think, the most controversial of all the moves. To me, I don't really see how it's super controversial considering they paid. I think they're probably, no lie, I haven't seen the Trevor Siemian contract. I believe they're probably paying Trevor Siemian more than they're paying Tua Tagovailoa, which says a lot. But what do you think about the decision to bring Tua into this quarterback room?
Well, there shouldn't have been any controversy. I know there's some controversy with the fan base for whatever reason, but I'm sure that this was a complete no-brainer from the front office. You essentially bring in Tua Tagovailoa, who at worst is going to be one of the most elite backups in the NFL, for the veteran minimum. The Miami Dolphins are paying out, his entire contract. I actually have no idea why this was such a polarizing topic on Twitter and among the Falcons fans. Like this is a move you do 10 times out of 10, no matter what your quarterback room looked like. And the main reason why Tua Tagovailoa agreed to it is, I mean, he's getting paid like very well. Miami is fitting the bill for him, but he could have gone anywhere in the NFL, and every single team would have given him this contract. He decided to come to Atlanta because he actually, has a legitimate chance of winning this quarterback competition. There aren't too many starting spots open in places where he would have the weapons that he has the potential to have in Atlanta. But yeah, Tua a few years ago was a Pro Bowler at 4,600 yards. I know that he's not the same quarterback. I know he's had his issues with the concussions. But even the last couple of years, like 2 years ago, he had a touchdown interception ratio of 19-7. He's a fine quarterback. Like, yeah, he's a fine quarterback. You can sort of give the reins to kill some time in the season, so to speak. He's a fine bridge quarterback. And if he does win that starting job, then more power to you. You have a starting quarterback who's making peanuts this season, and yeah, it's a great move. Like the Tua move is an A+ move because no matter what happens, it's no risk. It's not a low risk, high reward. It's a no risk, high reward move. The only sort of risk is if he gets hurt in the middle of the season and you cost yourself the opportunity cost of finding another backup quarterback, but they're sort of hedging their bets with Trevor Siemian, who, I'm pretty sure that they'll probably go into the season with 3 quarterbacks, and then Trevor Siemian can be a fine backup quarterback if, Tua does suffer a catastrophic injury or, suffers another concussion and can't go or whatnot. But this was an A+ move by the Falcons.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little thing, but the 2 left-handed, like first and second string, both being left-handed quarterbacks, that's just a nice convenience thing for the centers and for the offense. You can really structure the offense for left-handed quarterback, and in terms of the progressions and everything. And Simeon's enough of a vet that he can just deal with it. He can adjust quickly, I'm sure, if he had to enter the lineup. But to me, it's like if you had told me back when they were drafting Michael Penix, it's like, oh, we want a quarterback to pair with Penix. Do you want Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles tear for 3 years, over $100 million guaranteed, or do you want Tua Tagovailoa coming off a bad season for $1.3 million? I don't know anyone that would have picked Kirk Cousins in that situation. So I think Tua's not this great quarterback. He has had great seasons in the past, and I think people maybe are a little too focused on that last year was a disappointment, but Tua, if you look at the totality of his career, I think has been roughly an average NFL starter. And I think that's about the line we need Michael Penix to cross if we want to invest in him for the future. So if Michael Penix can't beat out what I think is roughly, on average, an average NFL starter and Tua Tagovailoa, then that's our answer, right? If he can't beat Tua, then we know that we need to go get another quarterback. And, also, how many times do we need to see this play out where a quarterback falls out of favor somewhere, goes somewhere, signs a 1-year deal, and then just has a resurgence of his career? Sam Darnold, everybody thought Sam Darnold was garbage. Goes to Minnesota, has a great season, and now just won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, 2 seasons later. We've seen, Jared Goff do this. Goff was good, then he was bad, then he goes to the Lions, completely resurrects his career, and is now, competing every single year. We've seen, obviously, Geno Smith go through this. Now, unfortunately, Geno Smith is back with the Jets. That sounds like a total nightmare for him, but, had some good years in the interim. So just, given what they paid for Tua, I get that he has injury concerns, but, the worst case scenario is that Penix and Tua get hurt and you're starting Trevor Siemian and you're probably picking top 5 in the draft. That's not that to me, that's fine. If that's what happens, you roll, D&D reference, you roll a 1, you throw that D20, you roll a 1, your quarterbacks both get hurt and you're picking top 5 in what could be another great quarterback class. It's certainly going to have a lot of quarterbacks in it. I don't know how we'll feel about those quarterbacks, a year from now, but there's going to be a lot of them. That's not the worst case scenario. You're not owing anything to Tua. Unlike Kirk Cousins, if he doesn't play well, he's not owed anything next year. You can let him walk for absolutely nothing. You're free and clear. You've still got Penix, as a backup, through the rest of his rookie deal. And then it's just like, it just seems like a no-lose situation here. Like, he plays great. You let him walk next year, potentially get a comp pick. He plays okay, and maybe he's better than Penix, maybe he's not, but he's getting paid $1.3 million, so you're getting surplus value there no matter what. Or he gets hurt or plays badly, and then Penix is probably starting. So that also is telling you exactly what you need to know. So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I don't see the downside here. Like, unless you think, striking out and getting a top 5 pick is the worst case scenario, which to me doesn't seem to be the case. So, yeah, to me, Tua makes too much sense for this team, and I'm expecting him to be roughly the middle of what we're expecting, where he'll be a passable starter for this team if they need him. I also won't be shocked if we don't even see him because Penix is playing and is playing decently well. But, it's a good setup. And it just makes too much sense. And there's just so little invested. Like, I don't see the downside.
Yeah, I mean, look, man, Penix is going to have his chance. I think he has a final chance here. This is not the regime that picked him. I feel like we came out of last season with more questions than answers with Michael Penix, which is not the place you want to be. And now you've sort of given yourself a bit of a runway to move off of him if he's not what you expected. I mean, first of all, Stefanski came out immediately and said, yeah, this is going to be a competition, which I was also happy to hear. Like, yeah, you brought in Tua with the sort of expectation for him that he's going to compete for this job. Let them compete. Like, let it be a straight 50-50. When we're down there in camp, I would love it if, we saw a true not one of those, all right, well, Penix is going to get all the ones and then Kirk Cousins is going to run with the twos the way that we have. No, split it evenly, 50-50. Like, split the reps, do a full-on preseason competition. Hopefully, the coaching staff actually starts the starters in the preseason. Maybe we won't see Penix because, he's coming off torn ACL. We should see him in camp at some point. But, yeah, and like you said, if Penix cannot beat Tua in a competition, then he has no business being the starter of this franchise. He has no business being the guy you sort of hand the keys to at this franchise. If he wins the competition, if he plays well, then you can sort of discuss, possibly extending him and moving forward with him. I think he'll still have next year is his 5th year option, if I'm not mistaken. 2, 3, or no, next year is year 4.
Next year would just be year 4. Yeah.
Okay, so you still have some time. And if both quarterbacks wind up being a disaster, then it's not the worst thing in the world. You'll get a top 5 pick, top 10 pick, in what should be a very, very strong draft class next year. And then you can fully reset and move forward, and you'll have a surplus of picks. You'll have a surplus of cap space, and you can sort of let Cunningham and Stefanski go out there and get, quote unquote, their guy at quarterback and take that big swing.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's a good move, and I think it's a good move for competition. It's a good move for offensive continuity. It's a good move for evaluating the 2 quarterbacks. It's a good value. I mean, just happy to see it. I think it's a much more cognizant and much more mature situation here than we got last time, where it was, let's sign someone for $100 million and then also draft someone in the top 10 and just make it a whole ass mess. Whereas this one, it's like, well, whoever wins, and we'll go from there. So it's just a better situation on the whole. But yeah, staying on the offensive side, obviously we just got the Brian Robinson signing today, but they also brought back Austin Hooper at tight end. Jahan Dotson comes in at wide receiver. Olamide Zaccheaus reunion as well. what do you think about these offensive additions? Do you feel good about where the offense is now, or at least better than it was before this?
I mean, I feel better about the wide receiver room, but last year you had David Sills finishing the year as your wide receiver 2 and being the wide receiver 1 at certain points where Drake London was out. I don't think these guys are world beaters by any means. I mean, Dotson, you're hoping he regains his form from his initial years with the Washington Commanders. He's still only 25 years old. He still has some upside. He was behind that star-studded Eagles wide receiver core the last couple of years, but he's a very good blocking wide receiver. He's improved on his blocking a lot. And then Olamide Zaccheaus, old friend, someone that's sort of homegrown, so to speak, in that the Falcons signed him as an undrafted free agent, and he made the roster. He broke out a little bit in Atlanta, and he had a nice couple of years with Washington. I still don't think that the wide receiver room is completed yet. I still think you need to find that, wide receiver 2 somewhere, whether that be the draft or, a trade market possibly, or somewhere else in free agency. Because I don't know about Dotson as the wide receiver 2 right now, but I feel a lot more comfortable about him being the wide receiver 3 and about Zaccheaus being, a depth piece. But overall, they rebuilt the wide receiver room at least somewhat. That was definitely a big priority. The bigger sort of question mark for me when it comes to the offense is the offensive line just sort of aging out a little bit. What are we going to do about, the tackle positions moving forward? Well, what will we do about, is Ryan Newsel the guy long term? I think that Stefanski, and then you have Bill Callahan, who's a legendary coach as his assistant. I think they're going to really prioritize sort of a shift when it comes to the offensive line, at least when it comes to size. Remember in Cleveland, they had those sort of road graders. They had those big-bodied, offensive linemen that won with power versus finesse. Whereas in Atlanta, we haven't had that it's going on 20 years almost. Like the last time we had that was in the Matt Ryan era, with McClure, Sam Baker, Tyson Clabo, Harvey Dahl, and those guys. It's been a lot of finesse lately. So it's gonna take quite a bit of resources where you need to look into sort of rebuilding the offensive line, and then establishing the wide receiver room and establishing what you're going to do about these skill positions. So it'll be interesting, but this is where it's very beneficial to have those extra draft picks and have all that cap space, because it's not just a 1-year reclamation project. This doesn't happen overnight. This will probably be happening over the next 2 or 3 off seasons.
Yeah. So, I think temporarily you're probably having Dotson handle wide receiver 2, and Zaccheaus can fill in as a wide receiver 3 when they do play 3 wide receivers, which I'm kind of thinking, based on what they've done so far, this is going to be like a heavy tight end team. They brought in Hooper. They kept Charlie Warner, which was kind of a surprise to me. So, like, you've got 3 starting tight ends. They're probably going to play a lot more 12 and 13. So, really, you only need 2 wide receivers for that. So, they're probably going to de-emphasize the wide receiver room, maybe add someone in the draft. And then let that guy develop. Probably maybe add 2 guys in the draft. We'll see. And then next offseason, or maybe in season, if they're playing better than expected, maybe they make a trade for somebody, or maybe they go into next season looking to fill that wide receiver 2 spot in free agency, or go back to the draft again. But yeah, like you said, I think the offensive line is just something to monitor. Like I kind of imagine they will add a tackle at some point. Obviously, next season they could move on from Caleb McGarry and save pretty much all of his cap. Like, I think they could save $15 million in 2027 if they do move on from Caleb McGarry. If he's healthy and is playing well this year, maybe they just let it ride for another year. We'll see. They restructured Jake Matthews again, so clearly they feel like he's going to continue on there for at least a little while longer. But yeah, I mean, center too. We'll see what they do there. They brought in Corey Levin as like a veteran backup, which is nice because they didn't really have that last year. Thankfully, didn't need it, but I wouldn't bet on that happening again. So good to bring in someone like Levin, who we know can hold the fort in the event of a Nuzul injury, but also kind of a show of faith in Nuzul that I wasn't necessarily expecting. I thought they might go for like Ethan Pocic or go for more of a starting center and just going for a depth center. It seems like maybe they're higher on Nuzul than we thought they would be. But offensively,
yeah,
I
that's a
think
little
yeah,
surprise
yeah,
to me too. Like he's of the smaller variety a little bit, but again, that could just be them, saying Nuzul is a fine bridge center. McGarry's a fine bridge tackle. Jahan Dotson's a fine bridge wide receiver too, and just sort of letting it ride because they know this is a marathon, not a sprint, so to speak.
yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. But defensively has honestly been where the majority of the moves have come, and most of those even have come on the defensive line, where we saw 3 free agent edge rushers added. We saw a number of free agent defensive linemen added as well. We also saw, obviously, the team didn't bring back Leonard Floyd. They let Arnold Ebiketie walk to the Eagles for a comp pick. We don't know what's going to happen with James Pierce. That one seems to be up in the air. But, in comes Azeez Ojulari, who a lot of people wanted last offseason, comes in here at a fraction of the price that he would have cost to go anywhere other than the Eagles. Samson Ebukam is one that I like too. Guy now 2 years removed from an Achilles tear, but before that injury was coming off a 9.5 sack season. And then Cameron Thomas, who's just a really good run defender, base down sort of edge. I honestly like those guys. I feel like those are actually upgrades over the depth players that the Falcons had last year. Not sure that we can do a whole lot about James Pierce just maybe not playing because of getting arrested. But in terms of like upgrading the depth they had, especially in terms of the run defense, I like the moves. But what do you think about what they've done so far there?
Yeah, look, man, again, like the moves aren't sexy. They're not. Nobody is going to write home about this Falcons offseason. We're not going to be looking back on this offseason years from now, talking about, this was it. That this was the year things changed for the Atlanta Falcons franchise. But I like it. I like Samson Ebukam. I feel like that's a low risk, moderate type reward guy that had damn near double-digit sacks. We'll see how he looks coming off that Achilles tear. Old friend LaCale London is back. They're addressing the depth, and it's not anything where these guys may sort of win you a division. Who knows? Maybe they do if everything breaks right. But maybe these are the guys that are going to be the backups to the starters who possibly win you the division in a year or in 2 years. Long-term, signing some of these guys as backups, maybe it's a 1-year deal, but maybe it turns into a multi-year deal. I can tell you right now, I'm damn sure a lot more confident in your depth linebackers after signing Channing Tindall and Christian Harris than I was last year, with it being J.D. Bertrand and the ghost of Troy Anderson, who's actually still on the roster somehow.
His contract hold, yeah. Because he stayed on the pup all year. His contract told. I haven't seen that actually happen before. But yes, that did actually happen. So
I mean, who knows? Maybe they get something out of old French.
This is the time. This is the time. Finally, 5 years in, we're gonna get. It's finally happening. Yes.
DNPs will be vindicated.
Yes.
But yeah, so. I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. Deshaun Hand is another guy that Chargers fans were actually sad to see go. I'm happy about the moves that are being made. I'm not throwing my hands up saying, this is a disaster. How could the Falcons not do more? I think the Falcons, had they kept Terry Fontenot, would have done a lot more this offseason. They would have restructured, those contracts. They would have, maybe they might have even traded next year's first to trade back into the draft this year, because Terry Fontenot would have been a desperate man in a desperate position. We saw that from Thomas Dimitroff at one point. He actually was that in the offseason last year in a way as well. But that would have set this franchise back long term. I think it would have been one step forward, 3 steps back. Here, we're taking a step back a little bit this offseason, but you're setting the stage. You're sort of clearing the way, the pathway to take 3 to 4 steps forward. And that's where I'd much rather be a few years from now versus, just going all out to win the division. Even if you win the NFC South this year, if you go all out, I don't think that this team is really ready to compete for a Super Bowl or to really, go deep in the playoffs. I hope it happens. Obviously, like nobody hopes it happens more than we do. We as a fan base, but we just sort of have to look in the mirror a little bit and be like, this team really isn't ready yet. This is year 1 of a new regime. Let's set the stage to really become ready in the next couple of seasons. And I think for as low key as this offseason has been, next offseason will be a 180 and we'll see some real fireworks. And that's where, you'll really make hay, but you have to set the stage for that. You have to clear the way for that. And this offseason has been sort of clearing the way for that.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. I do like those moves a lot. I think ultimately they and that's what Brandon Brass said with his $2 super chat just now is we raise the floor of the team instead of the ceiling. Raising the floor is a lot cheaper, and sometimes it actually results in better results for your team because you're limiting the variance that you have, especially the variance due to injury, and it's not always the worst move. But I think the Falcons were always chasing the bigger names, and you think about like Leonard Floyd. Like Leonard Floyd was like a good addition last year, but like $10 million was what he cost, and they kept David Onyemata when they could have saved like, what was it, 12, 15 million by moving on. They kept him, and like, yes, he was solid, but like he did not deliver that type of value. Now, shout out to him. He went and got another 10 million from the Jets. So shout out to David Onyemata. But yeah. So, that's good, but it's just, there are like more cost-effective ways. Like Deshaun Hand is probably going to give the Falcons David Onyemata level production for like $3 million instead of like 20 million which is what they paid him. Azeez Ojulari or Samson Ebukam is going to give you Leonard Floyd production for probably like $3 million instead of 10. It's just like, you can go for these sort of second tier guys, probably get 90% of the player and not break your bank and not max out not cancel out comp picks, not do this, not do that. And like, we may see the Falcons whenever the second wave of free agency hits, after the draft and these comp picks get locked in, they may go out and spend some more money. But like for now, it's just like, yeah, let's fill the holes on the roster. Let's get the guys that we need to raise the floor of this team. And then let's see what happens in the draft. And then we can go back into free agency and figure out what we need to do. Because we're all sort of drawing conclusions based on incomplete data right now. We haven't seen the draft yet, which, guys, is a big deal. They don't have a first-round pick, but that's still going to be a big deal. And they're, based on what we've seen so far, probably means they're probably going to end up with more picks than they're going to start this draft with when it's all said and done.
Yeah, the Falcons also restructured They restructured Bates. I think they restructured Chris Lindstrom. These are all moves that happened after the big wave, quote-unquote, wave of signings. They should have a decent amount of money right now, from what I understand. I haven't seen the numbers exactly, but they should have between 17 and 20 million right now.
Yeah. They have 14 at the moment. They restructured. I think it was Terrell and who was Matthews and maybe one other guy. Yeah.
Sorry, it was Terrell, not Bates.
Yeah, some secondary player that's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of those. Yeah. I mean. Matthews, I was kind of surprised that they restructured because, I mean, they're obviously still very confident in his abilities. And I mean, yeah, Jake Matthews has been the steady metronome of this franchise for the past decade. But yeah, I mean, basically every team wants to have that $6-7 million in emergency fund to go into the season. Still leaves you with like $7-8 million. They could make some moves in free agency later on in that second wave where it's not going to cost them a comp pick.
Yeah. Yeah, and they have other levers they can pull. If they end up drafting a blocking tight end, which I kind of think they will, maybe they get through camp and decide, oh, maybe we can move on from Charlie Werner and free up another $5 million. If Clark Phillips doesn't win the job in camp, that's another $3.6 million they can free up. I'm kind of surprised, honestly, that he stuck around, but good for him. He'll get a chance to compete in camp, it seems like. So, he'll have an opportunity there, and if he wins, great. And if not, that's another $3.6 million back. So, like, there's opportunities here to create more money. And like one that we haven't talked about yet that I wanted to shout out was getting LaCale London back for like $2.6 million. Like, he had 5 sacks and like 9 tackles for loss as a DT. And this nobody wanted to give this guy a contract. I can't believe it. So maybe he just wanted to come back here. I don't know, but like that's insane to me. This dude, like based on his production, his contract like estimates by like Spotrac and some other sites were like $10 million a year because that's that level of production. So like I think like I'm just like doing cartwheels. Like, oh, we get LaCale back in here. That's awesome.
LaCale, old friend, 7 tackles for a loss as well last season.
Yeah.
So,
that's like top level production for a DT. So,
it's not the era to be a DT in. It's very underappreciated. If you were a great DT 40 years ago, you could be going to the Hall of Fame with the proper production. The other thing to consider, guys like a Clark Phillips, even a Charlie Warner, and even up to a Michael Penix. I'm not saying Penix is going to get cut, but some of these guys that are sort of on roster bubbles, this is not the regime that drafted them or brought them in. So there's not really Ian Cunningham isn't tied to Clark Phillips the way that Terry Fontenot was, in that Fontenot drafted him. Normally these GMs come in, these coaches come in, and they want to bring in their own guys, and it takes some time for them to bring in their own guys. They can't really replace everyone right away, but I feel like that makes it all the more likely that some of these guys aren't going to be there if they don't win their competitions this training camp, because there's nothing sort of holding them there if they can't really get on the field from that sort of psychological perspective of this is the guy that drafted you. We see it all the time of, how many times has it happened in every sport where a guy overstays his welcome, so to speak, because of the draft lineage, because the GM doesn't want to admit failure and he doesn't want to admit that he made a mistake with this pick. That's not the case when a new regime comes in. Cunningham and Stefanski aren't tied to any of these guys except for the handful of guys they just brought in free agency.
Yeah. And we'll see how that plays out. But like you said, I mean, I like the approach, like overall. And, there weren't any, just wrapping up the free agency signings. I mean, nothing huge in the secondary. We did lose D'Alford. Like, good for D'Alford. He goes and gets a big contract from the Bills. So good for him. Yep. And I think they were probably surprised by that level of compensation. They weren't really willing to match it. I don't blame them. So like slot until Billy Bowman gets back, like is a little bit of an issue. They bring in like Darnay Holmes, who's like a depth slot corner. I don't really think he's a shoo-in for the roster, but like right now it's like, well, I guess Natrone Brooks is your starting slot corner. So that's a spot that we're probably going to see, more investment in, but yeah, probably.
We'll address that someplace. Like, Natrone Brooks has been my guy in camp, but leave him on special teams, please.
Slot is better than outside, but yeah, I mean, we'll see how that plays out, obviously. But they've got work to do still. There's a couple of spots on here, and then we do have a whole new special teams situation with Nick Folk and Jake Bailey coming in. You got any thoughts on sort of the changing of the guard at kicker and punter?
With punter, I thought Pinion did a fine job last year. I was actually kind of surprised that they didn't bring him back. They went straight, I guess, trade with the Dolphins, where they swapped punters from last season. And then Nick Folk. I'm excited about Nick Folk, even though it is a bit rich. You gave $4 million and you sacrificed essentially a comp pick to sign Nick Folk, but this was one of the best kickers in the NFL last year. I think he was the most accurate field goal kicker, minimum with like the minimum of like 10 attempts. So I mean, remember Folk for the Jets he was automatic. I mean, he beat the Falcons last year. He
Yeah.
nailed what, a 58 yarder
Yeah. Yeah.
at the buzzer to beat Atlanta. If he misses that kick, maybe the Falcons are in the playoffs. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I do feel like Nick Folk is going to sort of steady the kicking woes that the Falcons have had the last couple of years. And they've had some big troubles. I think Zane Gonzalez was fine, but I think Folk is a bit of an upgrade, and just swapping out the special teams coach as well is going to be a big boon, because the Falcons special teams unit last year was one of the worst in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can't argue with the results of what Nick Folk has done the last couple of years. I mentioned this with Trayshawn on Tuesday, but it was like, I wonder if that was like a Ryan thing, where Ryan was like, I remember how much success we had with Matt Bryant, and that dude kicked well into his 40s. I don't care that Nick Folk is in his 40s. That doesn't bother me at all. Let's go get the most reliable kicker in the NFL right now, and that is Nick Folk. So I wonder if Ryan's like pulling for the old kickers here in Atlanta. So we'll see. But yeah, I think ultimately, like, I think Jake Bailey is a good punter, and so was Pinion. So that one's probably mostly a wash. But Folk, again, Zane Gonzalez did have, I think, his best stretch of his career here in Atlanta over the second half of 2025. But I think the Falcons were probably wise not to like overinvest in that small sample size. And I really appreciated Zane coming in here and like fixing that room. But we also saw, we've seen kickers come into Atlanta and do a half a season and look great. Then the team's like, okay, great, you're our kicker. And then that's not gone super well. Maybe Matt Ryan was also remembering a little Italian ice, Giorgio Tavecchio situation there as well. So, but yeah, I think these two guys, as long as Nick Folk can stay healthy, I think we should be good. I think we should be good. So
also, Corey, Lenny Krieg is with the Jets now. So Lenny
Yeah.
Krieg is absolutely never going to kick.
Yeah, the Falcons let him go. Yeah, they moved on. So don't have to worry about Lenny Krieg anytime soon. I imagine they will bring in some kind of practice squad kicker, but we'll see who that is. But all right, before we get to our final overall thoughts here, we got Solaire with the $2 saying, unrelated, I hate the Tua signing. Not because of anything about Tua, but I'm not looking forward to the influx of Hawaiian fans. The Mariota mommies, I believe, is what Kendall Jackson called them. Tua could have both legs broken. They would still be screaming for him to start. Well, that does come with the territory. I appreciate their passion. Hopefully it will be less contentious this time around. But I do understand. It did get a little heated at times during the Mariota saga. So perhaps the Tua saga will be more positive. That's my hope. And we got Brandon Brass with the $2 asking thoughts on Colton Hood or Keith Abney in round 2. Well, Colton Hood would be great. I just think Colton Hood's probably going in the first round. Keith Abney, though, that could be one at 48. I feel like if you don't like, it just depends on how big of a need wide receiver is in your mind, because if you want like a wide receiver 2, you probably have to take them at 48. If you're fine with getting like a wide receiver 3, like developmental guy, you can wait till round 3. And there's a lot of guys there that I like, but it just depends on what you want. And vice versa with corner. Like after Keith Abney goes, there's some slot guys that I like, like D'Angelo Pons and Keontae Scott's another one. But yeah, corner thins out too. So it's sort of like you're probably going to have to choose one or the other. That's the only thing that kind of gives me pause there. But we'll see how they value it, because based on their moves, it certainly seems like they're planning to add a corner like pretty early in the draft. But we'll see how that plays out. But last move we should talk about is Ian Cunningham's first trade down. Technically trades down in the draft and adds Sidney Brown, who ended up starting for the Eagles a fair amount last year and has been a special teams demon for them too. But what do you think about? He's already matched Terry Fontenot in trade downs, and the draft hasn't even occurred yet. So,
I mean, hopefully we'll see some more actual. I mean, I think we've been begging to see a trade down in the first round for like a decade at this point, or however long we've been doing the show. That obviously won't happen this year. But yeah, I'm all for picking up as many pieces and picks and taking as many bites of the apple as you possibly can. But yeah, I mean, Sidney Brown, I guess it's better to get a special teams contributor like this versus to spend a fifth, sixth rounder on him and then he ends up still not being very good. That's one way to just throw your picks in the garbage. So at least this way, you're still keeping the picks, albeit a little lower than what they were originally.
Yep. So we'll see how that plays out. But I like Sidney Brown. I do think he's got some starting ability to him. He's not like a like high end starter, but I think he's a great like third safety that can play kind of wherever you need him, and is a great special teams player. So I like adding him. He's still on his rookie contract too, so like really cheap. So I like that move. And really, I mean, like you move down a few spots in the fourth. I think you move down like 10 spots in the fourth or 8 spots or something like that, and then you move down, like 20 spots in the sixth. So it's like the 20 spots in the sixth is like almost not even worth a draft pick. So it's like, not a huge deal, and you get a player back. I like it. I think you added like I think the equivalent of like a 4th round caliber player in my opinion. Now you don't have control of him for 4 years, but I do think he's probably going to be a higher impact player than someone you would be drafting on day 3 at this point. So makes sense to me. But yeah, just in totality, like we've seen, it's a very consistent strategy from this team where they're out here adding sort of like, I would say, low cost veterans. And it seems to me like it's pretty clear they're trying to fill these initial holes on the roster with, like fringe starter types, and in some spots better than fringe starters. Like I would say Jahan Dotson's like definitely a starting caliber receiver. I think Hooper's like a tight end 2 quality guy. Brian Robinson, who we haven't talked about yet, but like he's a guy that I think is definitely like a running back 2 type. And I think the edge rushers and Deshaun Hand, like you look at these guys, like there's some guys in here like, oh yeah, these guys, I think they could be starters, but not spending a lot of money, bringing in a high volume of players though, and really trying to lift up sort of the bottom end of the roster, add a lot more veterans here. Not necessarily older veterans though. Most of these guys are younger veterans. So what do you think about this strategy as a whole for Atlanta? And do you think it's how do you sort of, grade this given what you were hoping to see this offseason?
I mean, it's a necessary strategy, so to speak. Like this is what you have to do when you are sort of recalibrating and retooling in a way. I'm for it. When it comes to the moves in a vacuum, I mean, it's like a solid B off season, but when it comes to what I personally was hoping they would do, it's closer to an A, like an A minus type thing, just because, yeah, I'm absolutely thrilled that they're going this route. I feel like this was a very necessary route to go down. And it's something where the team is gonna possibly be better in the future. I'm not gonna guarantee that it'll be better because you have to, again, make the moves for the future to be better, but you're at least going to put yourself in position to take some of these big swings here in the future.
Yeah, I agree. To me, I have it as like a B, and like it has the potential, I think, like if they hit, like say Samson Ebukam does have that bounce back year that some people think he can, and is getting, 8 sacks. And like, Deshaun Hand is a starting caliber interior guy. Christian Harris ends up starting next to Divine Diablo and is, Jeff Ulbricht's next, linebacker reclamation project. And, the Falcons get good play out of Brian Robinson, and Jahan Dotson lives up to his billing as like a quality wide receiver too. Like if they hit on like half of those guys, this probably looks a lot better. It's just like if these guys are all sort of just middling players, it's probably not going to be, you can't really make this more than like a C plus B. But also, like, I feel like the downside is like, well, this isn't going to turn into an F because worst case scenario, you made 1 year gambles on a lot of guys, and if they don't hit, the worst case scenario is that you have a great pick in what should be a really good quarterback draft, and that's obviously not the worst case scenario either. And you've got no money tied up for the future and total flexibility. So to me, I think that's what keeps it in this, like, no matter what, the lowest it's going to be is probably like a C- or a C, and the highest to me is going to be like a B+ or something, because there's not a lot of variance in the class, and I think that's a good thing for where they are. Like, I don't think this is a swing for the fences type of offseason, and I think the maturity of it and will end up paying dividends in the future, even though that may not be the most result in the most fun or exciting 2026 season for this Falcons team.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when the team has made sort of the mistakes that they've made, you have to have an off season like this. Like you just sort of do.
Yeah,
because it's you have to sort of course correct a little bit. You have to correct the mistakes, and that's sometimes painful. Like, but it's the NFL. At the end of the day, you're gonna wind up getting your resources back. That's the good thing about the NFL. All it takes is one off season like this, and with the way the cap balloons, you're right back to a spot of surplus, so to speak, after just one off season like this.
Yeah, and I think that's where we could see dividends really pay off, and we could see a big like boost in 2027. Sort of regardless of what we see this year. Obviously, if they sort of crash and burn this year, I think they're going to be a very popular bounce back. But if they're sort of once again this, middling team, I think this team being like a middling team this year actually would be okay. Like, I think last year and the year before, like, this team kept talking about, we're going to win, we're here to win, we're trying to win, we're doing all this and that, like, we're making all these moves, we're spending this money, we're trading up in the draft, we're spending next year's first round pick to get this all settled. Like, it didn't result in any winning. So this year, if they go this route, they're like, well, we're being a little bit more conservative, a little bit more careful. And if they don't hit it all this year, then it's like, okay, well, I'm more willing to accept that than I was last time. So, I think they've bought themselves a little bit more breathing room. And again, I wouldn't rule out that this is a team that absolutely can win the NFC South, because, again, the NFC South is very bad. It's still bad. Like, the Panthers spent $100 million, and that team still has issues, and it's still, like, going to be an uphill climb for them to win this division. And the Bucs are bleeding talent, and didn't really, I think, make the necessary moves in free agency to separate themselves either. The Saints think that Tyler Shuck is the second coming of Drew Brees, and I think they're going to be very disappointed this year with that. The Falcons are probably just going to be mediocre again. So but the Falcons are probably going to be setting themselves up the best of these teams in 2027, and I think that's where we could see, hopefully, a new leader of the division emerge long term. But we got a ways to go before we get there. But anything else, Adnan, you want to add on this free agency period before we sign off tonight?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. I'm complimentary, and if we do win 7 games again, I'd rather it be in this sort of scenario where you were sort of expecting that mediocrity, so to speak, versus going all in, putting all your money on a certain number, and going all in with your moves, with these long-term moves, and then still disappointing with 7 to 8 wins. So it's not going to be something. I'm probably going to be a lot less frustrated this season than I have been in years past. Just given not just the expectation, but also given what the team has done in the off season, because it's different when you're expecting to win the division and you're shooting yourself in the foot left and right versus you're making a move in off season for the future, and then you win 6 to 8 games.
Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out, but I agree. I think this is probably going to be a more level season for the team, whether that's good or bad. But it just it doesn't feel like they're trying to convince us of anything, which is also refreshing, or like trying to be like, okay, get super hyped, it's time, we're gonna win finally. Yeah, I haven't really felt that, which is also kind of refreshing. So we'll see how that plays out. But guys, thank you all for tuning in to the Falcoholic Live presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Kevin Knight. He's Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. If you haven't already liked and subscribed, we really appreciate that. Thank you guys so much. And if you want to support the show, you can do so on Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or sign up with the channel memberships right here. We will have another mock draft for you guys coming real soon, post-free agency mock draft. Speaking of mock drafts, we're going to have, we'll be getting to some live mock drafts here on Wednesday in the coming weeks. So keep an eye out for that stuff. We're going to go full steam ahead for the NFL draft, talking about this class, which obviously the Falcons don't have a first-round pick, but I think they're going to do some exciting things with the picks that they do have. So we're going to be looking at that, looking at some of their options there. And like I said, Ian Cunningham's already matched Terry Fontenot's trade downs before the draft. And I think by the time the draft is over, he will have surpassed Terry Fontenot's trade downs, maybe by multiple trade downs at that point. So I'm excited to see how he operates versus what we saw from Fontenot, which was very rigid and very, we're going to keep our picks or we're going to trade up. And that in today's NFL, you got to be willing to trade up or down, whatever you need to do. And we didn't really see that at all from the previous regime. So hopefully get some surplus value there too to add to these comp picks that are hopefully coming the Falcons' way. But guys, once again, we thank you so much for hanging out. He's Adnan Ikic at Say Which Way. I'm Kevin Knight, Falcoholic. Kevin, we'll talk to you guys real soon on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Have a great night, folks. Thanks again.